obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. We have a treat for you today. We are here with Tim Maloney from Tim Maloney Advisory. He has been in the industry for many years. He's seen a lot of the changes that the industry has experienced, and we're excited to hear from him today. I'm Krista Oline, and Clyde Wilson are here to talk to Tim. So, Tim, can you tell us how you made it into this obscure industry we call the parking industry, and kind of what you've done, where you've been, and the things you've seen to lead you to this point to start your own company?
Yeah, absolutely. I always love talking about my parking origin story. So, back in the 90s, I was a kid in high school. I saw an ad in a newspaper for a valet position. Sounded amazing. So I was parking cars in the Bay Area for a valet company through high school and just loved it. It was a ton of fun. Went to college and started managing different locations. Got into kind of more of the hotel side of operating. Got through college, working in the parking industry. But yeah, my original story is a high school valet, and since then never got out of the industry.
That is so interesting. So your first job landed you here, and it's kind of a black hole, right? You never left.
Yeah, exactly. That's the parking industry. Once you're in for a few years, you're never getting out.
Absolutely. We hear that time and time again, and I think most of us here are prime examples of that. So what else have you done in the industry up to this point?
Yeah. So like I said, I started as a valet at 17, paid my way through college, operating different garages and, hotel facilities, and kind of moved my way up the ranks as I was finishing school. And in 2004, I went to work for ProPark. They were a smaller company at the time, obviously much bigger today, but mainly an East Coast-based company. I came in with one location on the West Coast in San Francisco, to be the city manager. And after about 10 years at ProPark, we had scaled the West Coast to 6 states, hundreds of locations, 1,000 plus employees, and I was doing a lot of operations, but also business development. So my last couple of years at ProPark, I led national sales, where I built out a sales org, and we did some organic and, formal acquisitions on that end. But yeah, I spent my first 18 years in parking as a parking operator. My last 10 with ProPark, which was a great experience. I loved working for a kind of a family-run company with a lot of history, but a lot of autonomy. And so yeah, I kind of cut my teeth on the operator side before I moved over to Spot Hero and dove in really deep into kind of the technology side of parking. And that was 2015. So about 10 years now ago, I went over to Spot Hero. The company was pretty small at the time compared to where they're at today. I was the first sales leader. So we had a handful of folks on the sales team when I started. And after a year, we scaled to probably 30 or 40 people on the team, and locations were coming on board left and right. And it allowed me to really kind of understand the impact that digital payments can have within our industry, whether it be reservations or on-demand digital payments. And I was fortunate to see an evolution of adoption. I think early on, and still today, operators were a little apprehensive to adopt reservations or even on-demand payments. They're worried about margins and that kind of thing. But I think we've seen, as things have evolved and consumer behavior has changed, where they're transacting on their phone, we've seen a pretty rapid adoption in the industry from a digital standpoint. And I loved being a part of that. We went from maybe 1,000 locations to 8,000 while I was there, and they're still growing. So great experience for me, made me really understand and realize I wanted to be on the tech side, or at least make an impact there for operators. So after my time at Spot Here, I went to Flash. I was there for a few years. I was vice president of enterprise solutions before moving over to be a vice president on the mobility team. So selling EV charging stations, different mobility offerings into the parking industry. So I was there for a few years, saw mass influx of acquisitions, really, from the time before Flash started making these acquisitions to kind of post-acquisition phase. I was able to kind of be a part of that. It was really interesting. I think Flash had a great vision, still does, on kind of how they want to impact the industry. But after my time at Flash, I moved on to Honk as their chief revenue officer, kind of continuing in my payments world. Great team. I really like the folks over there, and the product's amazing. So I, did my tour of duty with Honk, and in the last 2 years now, I've been leading my own advisory group, to Maloney Advisory, where I'm helping parking operators and tech companies figure out, their sales and marketing approach, their go-to-market. I help with mergers and acquisitions, and really just try to provide operators and tech companies with kind of a wide view approach of the industry, and really how they should be leveraging technology and sales and marketing to benefit their company.
Sure. Wow, you have a depth of knowledge. I feel like you've been in every little crevice of what the industry has and to offer. So, what have you seen as the biggest change from whenever you started as a high school valet,
Yeah.
little green high school
Yeah.
valet, to where you are today, where you are now advising people on some of the biggest parking decisions that they make in their career?
I mean, there's kind of two areas there: the responsibility of being a valet versus kind of moving up through the ranks over the years, and kind of what I'm doing today for the industry. I would say the first thing is the technology. I mean, literally, we had boxes not even locked, but we were just throwing cash into a podium, or there was no really revenue controls or much going on. I mean, you had some technology, but I've seen the evolution of really you know not a whole lot of technology within assets to a huge transformation. And I think, in the early 2000s, you started seeing reservations become more prominent for off airport facilities, and EV charging started coming into the scene. And, through that initial decade, you had a lot of apps starting to pop up: ParkWiz, Spot Hero. I was a part of BMW's launch of their Park Now app within the United States. I kind of helped lead the operational side of that. So, you've seen this progression in the early, 2000s, of some new tech coming in. You had pay stations, tickets were still prominent. I think from about 2010 to 2020, you really started seeing a more rapid adoption of and acceptance of technology. That stage, that period of time, we went from, pay stations with tickets to, gateless facilities with cameras and digital payments. And I think now, the last, say, 5 years, and even the last couple of years, we've seen a massive acceleration in advancement in technology, which I think is also driving the large investment in our industry. There's a lot of money coming in right now, either acquisitions or investments or, consolidation. And I think, yeah, we've come a long way in 25 plus years. I think we've looked at it as a very slow kind of progression, which it has been, but really in the last 5 years, we're seeing that accelerate. I think we're only going to exponentially see a change moving forward.
So I think as we move forward, I wanted to ask you the main question to start this off is, where are we in the industry now? In the progression, Krista and our team and I talk a lot about trying to scale the progression that happens in any industry. I have over the years been through the position of thinking the parking industry was different and we were slow and we were behind. The reality I've come to is we're not at all. We're no different than any other industry. The other industries also have this progression of moving forward and adopting new technologies, and how does it impact our business? Does it impact our business, and is this a direction we want to go? So I think we all have to go through that. I've been once I understood it, which was quite a few years ago, I've been kind of proud at looking at our industry and seeing how we're moving forward. So where do you think we are now?
Well, I think we're in a good spot. I think COVID was a little scary for all of us, in a number of ways, but from an industry standpoint, I feel really good about coming out of that. I think technology spurred a lot of that kind of recovery. I think COVID spurred a lot of technology. People wanted to go, hands-free and touchless, and that really helped, accelerate ticketless operations and all that fun stuff. But where are we today? One of the things I'm most excited about is all the interest in the industry outside of just traditional parking investors. You have a lot of money coming in, tons of acquisitions, a lot of consolidation from operators. And I really think that has been driven by the technology, by the advancements in the last couple of years, whether it be, kind of the forward flow of digital payments and how they're incorporated into all parking assets or types. I think intelligent camera systems are really, on the forefront and moving things forward. AI, how that feeds into everything that we're doing technology wise, and then data as well. So I think we're in a good spot. I think you're going to continue to see a lot of investment and growth. I think the technology is there and only going to progress. I think it's a matter of adoption. Is the industry going to kind of come together and solve some of these challenges we might be facing through like litigation or different types of regulatory issues? Are operators going to say, okay, I want to take this approach, maybe similar to a Metropolis, or at least where they have their own technology stack, whether through buy, build, or partner. But I think we're really seeing a aggressive increase in adoption of technology. I think that'll continue. And I think we're just kind of at this, not waiting game, but how will cameras play into the overall, industry? What will happen with regulation? Are people going to be getting citations? Are they not? I think that really is could potentially throw a wrench into how things move forward and how people park. But it's an exciting time. I mean, Clyde, you've said this, every industry has a progression in terms of adoption of technology and kind of their path. And I think we've actually done fairly well compared to a lot of industries. I just think now is the time where it's really going to take off. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the discussion about the legal issues that are starting to creep into how we manage our business. And, that's only going to be solved one way. We've got to get some leadership position in this industry that's going to change this. It's not going to be changed by the people that are tampering with it now. It's going to be changed by somebody who takes a different look at it. So we have somebody coming into our industry, or we have things coming into our industry now. With Krista and I were just in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. So we hired a Waymo and went cruising around the ferry buildings.
Yeah.
So we have the discussions of autonomous vehicles coming in. Personally, our feelings are they're nice. We love them. We were all ready to buy that one right there. But we also don't believe that it's going to really change the parking industry, other than people are just going to park more because they're going to drive more. But then we also have the AI and how that's influencing it, and it will certainly have an influence over autonomous vehicles and how rapidly that moves down the pike. We have the e-commerce transition now that we're going through. So, and we have the EV issue out there. So now I came into an industry that for the first 20 years, we didn't have crap to deal with other than trying to get the cars off the street. We're trying to get as much as we could of the cash in the bank. And I think we failed at that really well, but we tried. So now all of a sudden we have these EVs, AI, e-commerce, autonomous vehicles, all of these things starting to impact our industry. So where are we going?
Interesting. So where are we going with all these kind of outside elements like autonomous vehicles and these new...
They're all touching
layers?
us. They're all touching us.
Yeah. No, I mean, I obviously spent some time at Flash where I think the vision was mobility hubs. And I think that's still, an opportunity in the industry. But what does that mean? There's a lot of adjacent spaces, whether it be ride share, delivery, last mile, anything, EV charging, and really what fits in autonomous vehicles. With autonomous vehicles, I live in Santa Cruz near San Francisco. I see the Waymos running around all the time. I see them blocking traffic. I see them working just fine. I don't think we're going to have a need initially to really accommodate autonomous vehicles. Will it happen at some point where garages are going to be more robotic, or there's mapping indoors, which is already occurring, anyway, but yeah, but I don't know when that's going to be, right? I mean, it's probably not in the next 5 years. We'll see how, things progress on that side of things.
I'll tell you why it became a big issue for me. And this actually was a while ago. This was probably 10 years ago when the first autonomous vehicle discussion started. Mm-hmm. I had a really good friend of mine from the real estate industry who was at an Urban Land Institute conference, the national conference. And he calls me and he says, Clyde, I'm at the Urban Land Institute conference, and there's this conference going on about we're not going to need parking garages anymore because of autonomous cars. And there's a line down the hall of people that want to hear. And this presentation is about, we're going to grow a garden on the roof of the garages and put apartments in them. Well, those kinds of things start trouble for us, where that discussion got out there. People started thinking about replacing garages, not building garages. And we have to be an industry better at staying on top of that. And I think we're really doing a poor job of that right now, staying on top of those things, because it's also led us down the EV path, and actually where we are should be on the EV path. And I'm afraid it's going to touch other things that we're doing. That was why, autonomous cars all of a sudden, which I don't think are going to really change our industry very much, at least not in the time that we care about. But the stories started changing our industry.
Well,
And I get concerned about that. We hear that stuff all the time.
it's true.
And after writing one, we've all decided we're buying it.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, you might not get it for a while, but
A while. It may be a while, and it may be 25 years, but we'll get one.
Yeah, there you go. Just hope that everything's mapped by then. I mean, San Francisco, they've done a heck of a job of mapping it out for these autonomous vehicles. And they're starting to spread outside of the city and take people home to the suburbs a little bit. But it is fascinating. I think in this industry, we have buzzwords or things that pop up. And, it was autonomous vehicles a while back. Oh, my God, there's big data, and then this and that and AI. And I think some of them really have relevance and are important to the industry. Others, it's like, okay, we really going to be talking about autonomous vehicles for the next 10 years, maybe not.
And how much attention do those things get? They warrant attention, but of what weight? So how much attention is autonomous vehicle conversation getting in the industry as a whole? Is it a small portion because the impact will be small, or is it a large portion because everyone is kind of trying to prepare for an impact that's going to be large? We got to keep it equitable on what is the most important thing, instead of focusing on what you're talking about with the buzzwords and what's maybe kind of the hot topic at the moment.
That's what I try and navigate to for my friends in parking and the clients that I work with, is kind of what's real and what's not, right? I mean, when I go and work with a parking operator, I kind of break down their entire technology stack today, who they're partnering with, what they're using. Usually it's a lot of fragmentation. But it's like, well, did you know of these, data analytics companies that are doing cool things that can fit into this existing part you have? And you shouldn't be really focused too much on autonomous vehicles right now. So let's kind of take that out. But yeah, it's trying to break down what's real and what's not in parking technology, and what, from my perspective, the future will hold, or what we're kind of moving towards.
Yeah, I think, it was probably then 10 years ago when we first started seeing the impact of buzzwords on our industry.
I agree.
Buzzwords are simple. Everybody can say them. And they sound like they actually know what they're talking about. And I think it's up to us, it's up to our podcast, it's up to you, be able to put some truth out there as to whether these things have weight in our industry or don't. Autonomous vehicles are way down the road, even though they're cute and nice and fun to drive around in. But the reality is we have a lot of things that are going to impact us a whole heck of a lot more than somebody dreaming about autonomous cars.
Yeah. And I think we will have to address it. I mean, there will be a time where infrastructure is going to have to be upgraded. We're going to have to partner with, tech companies outside of our initial industry or outside of parking, kind of adjacent. But I think we have way more important priorities and things to focus on as an industry right now. Like, we talk about regulation, all the legal issues. How do we come together as an industry to combat, fight some of this stuff? I talk to execs from different companies in the industry all the time, and that's one of the big things that comes up, is who's going to take kind of charge and lead this conversation and advocate for the industry.
Yeah, we'll maybe talk about this offline because it's a big issue, and we have discussed that internally, and there are some things here that are going to be a challenge that we're going to have to deal with. This podcast isn't the place for it, but it may be, there are a couple of big issues going on right now, and it may be one of the biggest issues our industry is facing.
I agree.
Because it also touches so many things. So next, e-commerce now is here. It's kind of moved along the same path. The industry, the operators are starting to touch it a little differently. And it's grown tremendously, especially since COVID. I think COVID for the e-commerce aggregators was probably the worst and the best at the same time.
Right.
It was one of those things where they thought it was toast for them, and they came out the other side of it, and it's really moved well. So we want to talk about the direction that is going and where we think it's going to go.
I'd love to. I'm a big fan of digital payments and just digital platforms in parking. Obviously, I've worked in that space for a long time, but I think what you're going to see in the industry moving forward is a couple constituents that we're really looking at. I think obviously asset owners, making sure that they're getting, the most of their bottom line, yield management, focus on expenses, technology, how it can drive that. But I also think the consumer, the parker, is going to be a major focus moving forward because we're now meeting them where they transact. Digital payments is going to be, we went from cash to card, some digital payments. I think you're going to see digital payments eventually take over the majority of payments within our ecosystem. When will that be? I'm not sure. But with the combination of digital payments, the consumer is booking, paying, doing all the transactions most part through their phone. So the industry has been a little slow to move towards that. I think you're seeing a lot more adoption from operators with pre-booking and on-demand payment. And then I think with the transition of how people access garages, how the parker interacts with the facility itself through gateless operations, ticketless operations, hybrids, all of that, we're making the parker's experience easier. So, I think digital payments are going to play a big part in the connectivity with intelligent cameras and what's happening there, whether it be through, access monitoring, car counts, occupancy, issuing citations, informing real-time occupancy to the digital payment platform that has search demand data to start really thinking through dynamic pricing. Is dynamic pricing on the forefront today? No, but digital payments and those platforms are going to inform how we figure that out and start adjusting prices in real time. So I think you're going to see, reservations continue to grow, but I think also as on-demand payments, someone just pulls up and uses the QR code, or they're already in the system and the LPR camera just automatically charges them. You're going to see, continue to grow. So I don't think reservations are necessarily going away, but I think overall people are just going to transact more through pre-booking and on-demand online other than traditional methods.
So what risks?
Go ahead,
What
Chris.
risks do you see coming from that? So as a fellow consultant, we like to talk to our clients about, okay, you can do this, you can make this choice, but here are the benefits and here are maybe the downfalls of that option. And so whenever we're talking to clients to weigh the benefits versus the consequences, negative or positive, what kind of things do you share with them? Like, is it specifics to their location and how it could benefit from that, or what are some of the risks that you see?
Yeah, I think when an operator, asset owner, whoever it is, looks to have a digital footprint, whether it be pre-booking or on demand or both, you have to do your homework, make sure that you look at it from a holistic approach and view with what do I want my digital platform to look like? Who do I want to partner with? Some of the weaknesses or concerns when you find a third-party partner for these reservations or on-demand bookings is data security and privacy concerns. You want to make sure you're going with a reputable company that you're not going to have any exposure there. I haven't really seen that being an issue, but it is a concern and something to consider.
I think we have to believe it's coming, though.
Yeah, the data security and all that. Yeah, because you need to know if your partner is selling that data. Do you own the data? Do you get access to it? Some digital payment companies won't give you any of your data. The high level stuff, but not the deep dive, which again is where I think it's really important that operators and asset owners are looking at all their data from all different tech sources and consolidating that into some analytics platform. And I think with the data concerns that might be coming, it's even more important. I think another concern could be potential downtime and failures. We've seen some reservation apps, go down, have some issues. I think part of that is with new integrations with companies like Google Maps and Waze and Apple Maps. You're seeing a more volume come through these platforms. And I think if things really take off, you're going to have to, make sure there's platform stability and there's not downtime. I think customer adoption could be a concern, right? If we're investing everything and, hey, you got to, pay through your phone, download an app or pay a QR code, that's your only option. Will there be pushback? My feeling is no. It depends on the market and the location, right? You could be in a smaller market where not everyone has a smartphone or they like the old school way of paying. So, that's part of it. And for an operator, it's also the reliance on these third-party aggregators and payment companies driving hundreds of millions of dollars through their platforms in the industry. You want to make sure it's a mutually beneficial and kind of cohesive relationship and right for both sides.
I think we've been dealing a lot with the relationship between operators and aggregators and how this is all going to work out in the long run. And I'm a full believer that we're just in another transition. You came into the industry at the point where we still had cash and we were starting to try to move to credit card. For us, it was, a big thing because for the first 20 years of my time in the parking industry, we had only dealt with cash. And the credit cards were just kind of creeping in around the sides, and maybe airports and in New York City. First time I used a credit card to pay for parking was in New York. And probably that was 1991 or 1991. Airports were starting to use credit cards, and there was a battle to go through this changeover. It took a long time. Well, now we're already moving to the next level, to the next e-commerce level. And, I'm convinced, we as a group have talked about this a lot. We're convinced it's coming. The only question I have is it ever going to get here fully before the new thing comes out?
Interesting.
Because things are changing pretty quickly. So we have to be prepared for that. But I'm not worried about it. I think it's coming. I mean, we still run into at the conventions every now and then, you run into people who are still talking about, well, you've got to do cash. You've got to do cash here and you have to do cash there. That eventually will just go away. So what do you think I think one of the biggest questions now is you just hit on it, this relationship between the operators and online purchases and how they're all going to start working together to do a better job of dealing with the customer.
So how does that relationship need to kind of grow and evolve a little bit?
Yeah.
I think it starts with trust, honestly. I think
right now that's low.
Well, and you know what? It was a lot worse 10 years ago. Right?
It was.
I mean, one of the biggest challenges we had at Spot Hero was really getting operators to even listen to us and hear out why there's benefits and values.
Right.
But I think what Spot Hero did well is listen to the operator. It was not this naive, you have to do this or this or this. I mean, there were certain things that we understood from a platform side, a tech company and how the consumer behaves. But we really wanted to take in the operators, learn how they really operate and make sure it fits for them. And I think that built trust. But today, there's been mass adoption. These companies are driving hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, but there's still a lack of trust. And, you hit on it. There's still folks that want cash in their facilities. There's a spectrum of people that have adopted technology early, that haven't. And I think you have seen an increase in the percentage of the industry that gets that mobile payments and digital is helpful. But, it's an education piece too for not just, operators educating the parkers and their clients, but the industry, the technology companies, reaching out and explaining really the benefits and trying to educate everyone. But I do think it starts with trust. I think the deals in our industry need to probably get adjusted, the financial models in a lot of ways. And I say that because I work with so many operators and tech companies seeing how they're putting together pricing. And I think there's somewhat a disconnect in certain areas between what the operator's making and what the tech company, maybe not in digital parking, but like in enforcement, cameras, I think you're going to see an evolution of some of the way these things are priced, including with digital payment companies.
Yeah, I think you hit on a great point. Again, going back to my tour through the industry, I remember when, this was a long time ago, but I remember sitting on Saturday mornings in Monroe Carroll's office as he was really structuring how we are today or were about 5 years ago, because he had this battle of a lease company versus a management account company, and it had already killed him. Because I got guys all over the country that don't know how to determine what the value of a surface lot is.
Oh.
So I can't travel to everybody. So I've got to create this other model. And he had a couple of locations that he landed that wanted the management account model, and he was trying to build it. Well, the reality is that was great, but it was one of those transitional things that we're still in, and we didn't transition out of it. And the parking operators are struggling making money and have for as long as this has really been around. If you look at the management fees and the way the structures are built inside these contracts, you look at them today and you go, how do we do this? How does anybody expect us to do this? And being an audit company over 20 something years, I remember on the audit time, and, our client was the owners of the building, but you almost wanted to go to them and say, what do you expect? You're not paying these guys anything. You're not giving them any money for payroll. You're not giving them any money for off-site management. You're not giving them anything. So how are they going to manage a $4 million income location that makes its $4 million $1.50 at a time?
Right.
So it's my opinion, again, it's one of those transition things that we didn't do a good job of. I think we've done a great job on the technology side. We've done a terrible job of transitioning the contracts and the relationship between the operators and the owners.
I do think what I love about the technology and the advancements, and really Metropolis helped fuel this and the thought process in the industry, is how do I either take a white labeled approach or, kind of my own tech stack approach through partnerships. I don't feel that building typically makes a lot of sense for operators from a tech standpoint. Buying probably doesn't, but partnering and having a cohesive ecosystem of different technologies that you can go to an asset owner and say, look, here's my proposal. Management fee is 30 grand a year. Your technology fee is 10 grand a year, and I'm going to give you all the equipment, the digital, everything you need, right? And that's the relationships with the operators, the tech companies. I mean, PCI did a great job with white labeling their Breeze solution, and there's a lot of companies that are doing similar things through partnerships. So I do think operators have a better chance of increasing their margins through these partnerships, in kind of a different approach to how they're selling to asset owners and the models. I don't know what it look like ultimately, but I have seen a shift in these technology fees where operators are giving equipment to the client. Maybe it's white label, maybe it's not, but kind of folding it into their management agreement.
I think you're right. And again, it's that we're sitting here in a transitional period where we're trying to model that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think we're struggling with the model of exactly how we move forward with this. The operators, you can see them trying. I think they figured out, the main thing for the operators are that they have figured out now there's another way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll work their way through it.
Right.
And I think they're trying. I'm glad to see what we're starting to see. I think there's a lot of variation in this, and I think there's some that I'm not terribly proud of. But the main thing is they're moving the right direction and figuring out, I can get out of this. It's like we have one garage that we oversee that we in our performance monitoring program that we oversee that has a $200 a month management fee, and it's a 550 space garage in the middle of a downtown.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that?
Right.
And so when we come in as an auditor, we're automatically suspicious.
One other thing that we've seen that kind of on the flip side of that is operators are starting to see these other things in the industry happening, and internally they're starting to develop their own. So earlier you used the word fragmentation, and I like that idea and how that really is applicable to most things in our industry, because we do have all these outside pieces coming in. So what is your opinion on operators trying to do these things themselves versus partnering with someone that maybe that is their specialty?
That's a great question. So yeah, this is a lot of what I do is have conversations with operators around, should they buy, build, or partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they go out there and buy a tech company that, fuels what they're trying to do strategically? Do they build a product, or do they partner? When I evaluate operators' portfolios, I kind of assess what they're using today, what their main gaps are. And, I look at that buy, build, partner scenario depending on the operator. I feel that a partnership for 90% of the companies out there probably makes the most sense. I've seen large operators develop their own apps for reservations. That's not their core competency. When I was an operator, I would go to a property manager, a hotelier, whoever, and say, look, let me focus on what we're experts at, and you focus what you're experts at. So I think an operator trying to be a tech company can be very challenging. They have to have in-house support, a tech team. It's not just building something and letting it kind of sit. So, but then you do have companies, we have large parking operators that can build their own technology. I mean, Metropolis has completely done that from scratch. You have, SP Plus and other groups that have kind of their own technology offerings that they built. But even the large companies that have the funding and the ability to maybe try to put something together, I think it can be a distraction oftentimes.
Yeah, one of the phrases that comes to mind is just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Absolutely. I'm going to use that. It's so true. I just think, there's a need to stay focused in any industry and really have a strategy and execute on it. And I think when you have your core competency that you're really trying to kill it and focus on, you get really sidetracked trying to build an app or trying to build, a data analytics platform. Now, there's certain elements that I think from like business intelligence tools, different areas that an operator can build, but I don't think it's like a backbone system of their overall platform. I think it's like, smaller little areas that make sense for them to maybe have a proprietary system.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And like I said, probably the question of the day that Krista just presented to us. It's, I've watched this over my 40-something years in the parking business, and I've seen it from time to time where when you don't have a mentor, you're stuck. As soon as you get hired into this position where you don't have a mentor in your specialty, you get stuck. And it's been my biggest concern about the parking operators trying to having this tech division. It's never going to be big enough to have all of the people on the inside to be able to do the challenges that we're faced with. I see them trying. And again, I look at this more as it's the parking operators trying to figure out where the next place is. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of encouraging to see that, but I also see the downfall of this. And the partnership, the technology partnership is going to, I think, have a much longer play in being able to get where we're going, because it, again, goes back to what we as a company talk about all the time. What you see is not what's going to be here 10 years from
now. That's true.
If you won't be able to stand on top of that, you're going to lose. Go ahead.
I think we all worry about becoming obsolete or trying to see what the future is and put ourselves in a position where we remain relevant in that future. And so we don't want to just grasp at straws to make that happen. We want it to be a valuable path that we choose to get to that point in the future that adds to the industry, not going back to that word again, distracting or fragmenting from what our role is. It's what can our role look like in the future? What is our place in the future?
I think that the greatest thing is having been in the industry as long as I have and seeing it where it is now. I know where it is now. It's going to start changing again because technology is changing so fast, but it's so great to be in an industry that now I think is one of the most exciting ones out there. And if you take the right looks at it, there's so much going on, so many challenges. When you're what we were from 1970 to 2010, there was a lot of challenges because it didn't change very much. Today, as an industry, for the new people coming in, it's a challenge from day one. And it's going to stay that way because it's going to continue to move. So let's move over to another topic, EVs. Kind of what's your feeling on the EV market now and where we're going with what's happening with EVs?
Well, I like EVs, so I always enjoy talking about it. But I also am always very aware and in tune with the consumer, with where things are going, what's going to fit into parking, right? So do EV charging stations have a play in parking assets? Absolutely. Do we want to go in and put chargers in every single garage right away, hoping for the demand to come? I don't think we're at that point. I think we need to be prudent on following politics and seeing what type of regulation or lack thereof comes into play with EVs themselves. And then how's the infrastructure going to really support that? How are we going to get funding? So I do think EV charging, especially in California, certain markets today, plays a huge part. And you have to, for new construction, a lot of places put in a certain amount of EV chargers anyway. So I think operators want to be aware of what's going on in EV charging. Is it relevant today to their assets? Where, how, who are the players? I think EV charging companies understand the value of the parking industry and parking assets for their charging infrastructure. And you have companies now that are focused on the industry. They might sell outside of parking, but they have integrations with parts companies. They have, all these different types of features focused on the parking customer, like a parking charge solution. So someone pulls in, they pay for parking, they pay for charging all in one transaction. I think, if you're going to install EV, find these companies that are focused on the industry. But this is a lot of what I do. I've done EV charging assessments for operators throughout their portfolio and found, wow, your locations are in, highly demand areas. Let's figure this out versus, let's wait a couple of years. These assets make sense, but My problem is the ROI there. It depends, but you have seen EV charging station companies going more and more towards funding the installs and doing rev shares. And I think that's a really interesting model for us to look at as an industry.
It is. Yeah, it's so funny that when we're in your part of the world, I was there 6 months ago, and I remember sitting at a traffic light, and at every direction a car was pointed at me. In front of me, beside me, and behind me, there was a Tesla. Every one.
Mm-hmm.
There was at least one in every lane. Sometimes it was two or three. And then you show up here in Texas, and you have to hunt for one. They're here, but they're not. So the demand for EV charging and the way EV charging is going to evolve in Texas is going to be terribly different than the way EV charging is going to evolve in certain geographic areas and continue into the future. But it does impact our business, and trying to get it right where we're in the consulting and audit business. So trying to get all the money in the bank is always a challenge.
Right.
And EV charging just adds another level to this.
Yeah. One thing also is not just geographically, like across the country, but geographically, even speaking about Texas. I'm outside of Austin, and the concentration of EVs in Austin compared to the concentration of EVs in Dallas, whenever I go to visit there, or Houston, is vastly different. Whenever the Cybertruck first came out, it was like, oh, in Austin, Cybertruck. But then you go to Houston and you don't see a single one. So it's interesting, just even in these little micro pockets of metroplexes, what the demand is, and even in certain areas of those pockets where the demand hotspots are. So it takes a big perspective, but then it also takes a really focused, specific, like location specific. Where is your facility and what is right directly around you? We talk a lot about the 2-block radius is really the market for a parking facility, but then you do have people coming into the town if it's downtown location and that kind of thing that are considerations as far as EVs. But what is the micro market for each location?
Krista's EV market is really all you guys in California moving to where she lives.
There's a few of those moving out there.
And it doesn't help that Tesla planted itself here either.
That's true. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you have microclimates within urban centers that have demand, don't have demand. One of the things, and I sold EV chargers for Flash, so I was on that end of the world working with operators. The one thing I will tell an operator every time is make sure the EV charging station company you're partnering with or getting a quote from does their homework for you. Don't put the onus all on the operator to say, God, is there going to be demand here? How do I figure it out? A good EV charging station company should work with you and say, okay, our historical data shows that in this microclimate, there is demand, or, pulling up zip codes and registered EV users, and that zip code, where do they typically commute into? So when you're looking at EV, you have to know that there are places where you need it today. I mean, there are definitely high demands. You can generate a lot of revenue and also create repeat business because parkers want to come back because they have a good experience and they need to charge. And then there's other areas maybe within Austin that just doesn't make sense. So do your homework, definitely make sure the partner that you're working with, educates you and really tries to set you up for success. Because EV's here today. I think if we miss the boat in the next few years, depending on what happens with demand and usage, the industry will be behind to a certain extent. So very important to keep your finger on the pulse here. But I will say, it's not a right fit for every location. Just like parking tech and equipment is not, it's not one size fits all.
I think our opinion follows that very closely, but the one step that we've really kind of come to is there's no question the transportation, the vehicle is sitting in my driveway is going to change. I'm just not sure what it's going to change into. Over the next even 5 years to 10 years, it's going to change. Is the EV just that step to move where this is going? But 10 years or 15 years, it's going to look nothing like it did today. I believe most of us in our house over here are pretty convinced that that's kind of where we're going, that we're definitely changing. We're definitely moving in a slightly new direction, and what's sitting in the driveway and what's going to be driving around and what we in the parking business are going to be parking every day. I just don't think we're there yet and know exactly what that's going to be. You know what the biggest problem with it was? Government mandates.
Mm.
When the government steps in and starts making mandates, you start trying to create that, and you lose the development of where this is really going. And when you look back over everything that has been developed over time, most of it was done through private enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we're seeing the change in it now is the space industry. The government took it over in the 60s because we were in this created space race with Russia. And then what happened? As soon as the space race was over, they never could move forward. And coming from the aviation industry, we on that side have that discussion a lot. How you have to get the government out of this. So now that we're kind of moving over to through some wonderful guys like Burt Rutan and some other things that's changed, we're starting to see that move now. But it took a long time. It's taken a really long time, longer than it should have. We're going to see the same thing here. What our car's going to look like is going to change. Is it going to be an EV? It's probably going to be some version of something like that. E-commerce, where is it? It's going to change. We're not there yet. I mean, we still have cash somewhere. Hard to find, but we still have it.
Yeah.
So is the e-commerce of today going to be where we're really going? Probably not, but some version of it, of how it works internally. So all of these things are in that wonderful transitional mode that we're seeing. And our job is to kind of keep everybody moving the direction and watch it begin to mature and evolve. And, it's just terribly interesting when you look at our industry. The parking ticket started 70, 80 years ago. You know what the first parking ticket was? The first vetted parking ticket. It was the same thing that in New York, and you're probably too young to remember this, but in New York, if you wanted to buy a bus ticket, you went out and put a quarter or something in, and you got this little ticket like the lottery ticket, right? The little tiny ticket. That was a ticket. That was the original tickets that got us into putting that in the lane and spitting a ticket out to a car. Well, we had a ticket until, of course, I'm a big person in pushing getting rid of tickets, but we had a ticket up till just a few years ago. And you know what that meant? It meant everybody in the world knew when I drive into a garage, I'm going to reach over here and pull a ticket. We've now moved ourselves into this funny place where I don't know that. I drive into a garage and I don't really know how I'm going to get in or out. Oh, we are touching a large population, so we do have to start moving towards standardizing that to some degree. And we can't have 10 different methods of every time I drive into a garage, I've got to read the signs to figure out how the heck do I do this one. That's a mistake, and we have to move away from that.
Clyde's touched on one of the things he has definitely taught me is really consideration for the first time visitor. So I think that plays into that concept as well. When the first time visitor arrives, they're going to be the one that blocks that makes a line occur outside of your facility, or, they're the ones that are going to cause the backup or the problem if there is one, if the signage and the way to enter and those types of things are not super clear and obvious. And with all the variety now, it is a challenge for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And it's just a transitional issue. Just a transitional issue. We the first one, as I mentioned earlier, in the aviation business, we started going through this issue in the aviation business about 20 years ago. And it was a slow start in how we navigated and moved airplanes around the country. And then all of a sudden it started, but it was still all over the place. It has just now really started to standardize again. And you're certainly seeing the benefit of it. We've also seen some of the challenges of it here recently too. But that's happened. So I got to watch that one first before it started in the parking business. And then when you start looking at some of the other related industries, we see the same things, very much the same things.
Tim, did you have any closing remarks? And then I'll close us out after.
No, not really. I mean, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. Clyde, I've known you for so long. We've had so many of these conversations before, so it's fun to, get it down and record it, and hopefully it resonates with the industry. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim. And I hope everyone had a great time listening and took something away from this episode. There's a lot of conversation here, and the industry's changing. Where's it going? We can only guess, but we're here for the ride. So let's do it. Thank you for joining us on the Our Parking Industry podcast, and we'll see you next time. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on our Parking Industry Podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.